Good morning and welcome to the Star Remodeling and Home Improvement Show. This is Bob Williams, your host. I own and operate the Star Construction Company in West Newbury, Massachusetts, and I thank you for joining us this morning on our show. I think we have some really pertinent and great information available on the show weekly, but especially this week. We have a special guest in from DigSafe, Lisa Powers.
Hello, Bob. Thank you for having me.
I thank you for coming in. A lot of folks out there may not know about DigSafe at all. They may not even have heard of DigSafe. So why don't you give us a little bit of history on DigSafe?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come here today, Bob. DigSafe is actually a private, not-for-profit company, and we accept phone calls from anybody, whether you're a contractor or a homeowner. Anybody who plans on digging, it's important to call us first. What we do is collect the information as to where you're going to be working and what type of work it is, and we pass it off to the utility companies who may have underground facilities in the area where you plan to dig. And what they do is the utilities send their own people out, or they hire contractors to locate and mark out where the underground lines are, so everybody knows what's below before they go ahead and tackle that project, so nobody gets hurt. There are no service interruptions, and it's a safe job.
And this is basically anytime somebody has to dig in the ground, you want to know that there's nothing underneath there. And so people are probably saying, well, this doesn't apply to my backyard, right?
That's actually a very common misconception. A lot of, contractors too, they make faulty judgment calls as to when they should be calling us. I'm not going that deep. I don't think this project would warrant a call to DigSafe, but actually the law requires any time that you move the surface of the earth, whether it's public or private property, to go ahead and notify our free service to do that. So, and it's very important because, famous last words at our call center is I didn't know that this was there, or I didn't think it would be this shallow. So it's really important to be aware of what's around before you go ahead with it.
So DigSafe, this is something that's been around since when?
Oh, early 70s. Back in 71, more and more underground infrastructure was being installed. There was a lot more construction. Suburban neighborhoods were thriving and building homes, and at the time, there wasn't a formal place to call to find out where underground facilities were. So back in the day in Boston, the big three utility companies, which was Boston Edison, Boston Gas, and New England Telephone, which is now known as Verizon, they used their own employees to accept calls for that purpose. I'm digging, can you tell me where your underground facilities are? And over time, we've grown to become incorporated through the early 80s, and now we are a full-service operation. Again, we're located in Woburn, Massachusetts, but we handle 5 New England states. So anybody digging in Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, or Vermont would notify our call center. And from that one location, we dispatch the utilities to mark out their underground lines.
And what number do they call if they have to call?
I appreciate you asking. Actually, we had an 888 number, but a few years ago, we adopted, along with all the other dig safes across the country, if you will, a new phone number, which is 811. It's a 3-digit dialing exchange like 411 or 911, but 811 is designated for anybody nationwide. Call before you dig. Every state in the country has something very close to what DigSafe is. We all operate independently of each other. Same premise. It's a private nonprofit. You call before you dig. But this 811 number is great that nationwide we're really building a lot of awareness. It's an easy phone number to remember. We're trying to get the homeowner to pick up the phone and call us. You might not want to know this as a construction person, but more and more people are opting to do their own home improvement projects, whether it's landscaping or something as simple as putting in a basketball hoop or any type of work like a mailbox installation. 811 is an easy number for the property owner to also remember before they go ahead and dig on their own properties.
And so I'm gonna slow you down a little bit.
Yeah.
This is nationwide that they can make this phone call.
Yes.
So this is something in every state. So
Every
it doesn't
state's
matter
got a
where you
DigSafe.
are within the U.S.
That's right.
If you have to touch a shovel to the earth, you should be touching your telephone first.
That's right. You should be. That's well said. Thank you for that. You got to make the phone call first. Every state law varies a little bit as to what types of activities qualify. In our neck of the woods, in our 5 states, the law is pretty stringent. Anytime you move the surface of the earth, whether it's with a shovel or mechanized equipment, anytime you do it, you got to pick up the phone and dial. It's just a good practice, even if it weren't the law. It's just the safe thing to do. It's free. There's no reason not to plan ahead and make sure that you get the underground facilities marked first.
And so somebody needs to do something like this and they're not sure that they need to do it, they still should pick up
the phone and call.
Call.
Absolutely. We get a lot of people saying, well, is there an exemption for this type of activity? I'm only going this deep. We're always going to say, no matter what types of exemptions are on the book, it's always a good idea to go through the process and let the utility companies know what your plans are, so they can have an opportunity to protect what they own underground, and to protect the personal safety of the person digging and everybody around them. A lot of people don't realize that it's not just immediate danger, which is significant. We don't want anybody electrocuting themselves. We don't want a gas line to be hit. But also, loss of service is a big deal these days. If you lose the ability to pick up the phone from a landline and dial 911 if you need emergency service, that's a big deal. Businesses rely on critical communications, electric, phone, cable, gas lines, and if somebody's found responsible for wiping out service, there's loss of revenue there. Businesses have to run. They need their critical communications. Restaurants need their gas service to operate their stoves and ovens. You have to think the far-reaching consequences of utility damage. So even if there is a judgment call, maybe I should call DigSafe, maybe not. We always say pick up the phone and do it.
And are there consequences if you don't?
There's what I just spoke of. We don't want anybody getting hurt. Number one reason we exist, but the consequences, yes, there is regulatory enforcement, and that goes to every state has a watchdog. Massachusetts, it's the Department of Public Utilities. They oversee the activities of excavators. They look at the performance of the utilities that mark out the lines. They determine fault if a line is damaged. And fines in Massachusetts, it's $1,000 first offense. Any subsequent offense thereafter can go up to $10,000. So it goes into the state's general fund, and they collect those fines from both utility companies and excavators. But it keeps everybody honest. Yeah.
So it could be an expensive project.
Could be a very expensive project. And not only are you worrying about the fines from the state, but the utility company can go after you for the damage as well. It costs some money to replace that line, send somebody out there, a tech, to splice and fix all of those fiber optic cables. If you go through them, it takes some time. So,
well, that's cool. Because the bottom line is what we're trying to do is hold everybody accountable for a lot of this stuff, and it's as simple as picking up the phone. And if you're not willing to pick up the phone nowadays, you're probably living under a rock.
Yep, and for those folks living under a rock, if you're not willing to pick up the phone, we also have a wonderful thing called Quick Ticket. You can go online and get your tickets. So you're a construction guy. I don't know if you take advantage of our online ticketing, but you're your own DigSafe customer service representative. If you want to upload multiple tickets for jobs, you can do that at digsafe.com. You apply for a password, and it gives you the capability of getting those work tickets 24/7 at your own convenience. So we get a lot of callers who stare with their knee, and they have, their coffee in one hand and a cigarette in the other hand, and they're trying to call us with the third hand that they don't have. So we like to send those folks online, when they're not driving, so it's safe to notify us. So that's another way to go about it.
All right. Well, we've got to go and talk to our sponsors about a couple of issues, and we'll come back because I'd like to delve into that a little bit more as to how that works for people, and maybe we'll walk through the process. We'll be right back.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to the Star Remodeling Show. We're here in the studio this morning with Lisa Powers from DigSafe.
Hello.
And Lisa has been explaining, that the easiest thing to do is pick up the phone, call, find out whether you can put that shovel in the ground. Now, you've mentioned a couple of things early on, and I'm going to come back to those.
Okay.
But right now, what I'd like to talk to you about is that online aspect of using DigSafe. Number one, we can call 811, and that's across the country. Yep. It's not hard. 911, 811, 411, these are fairly simple numbers, and they've been designed to work for you, the public, so that they're easy to remember. That will put you in touch with DigSafe. If that's all you can remember, you're in good shape because they will walk you through the process. I guarantee it. But somebody wants to do this online, or somebody like myself that's in construction, and hasn't taken advantage of all the changes that have happened through DigSafe, because it used to be you had to make a phone call.
That's right.
You had to wait to get a ticket number. You had to wait X amount of days before you could do anything. You had a bunch of requirements that you had to fulfill before they could even start the process for you, and we'll come back to that again. But now you're saying I can do this online, and if I got multiple digs over multiple days, that I can do a lot of that myself.
You certainly
So
can.
why don't you walk us through that a little bit?
Okay, well, first of all, we strongly encourage first-time callers and homeowners to pick up the phone and dial 811 instead of going online, because there's a lot of questions that you may have if you're not familiar with the process, and we'd love one of our customer service representatives to go over any questions that you may have. But for the seasoned professional like you, like I said, it's really easy to go online and get your tickets rather than spending your time on the phone. And if you are new at it, you go to DigSafe.com, and there's a link right on the homepage. It'll smack you right in the face. You can't miss it. It says sign up for Quick Ticket. And Quick Ticket is our online permitting program, and you click on that and you give us your company information, your email address, and we'll give you a password that gives you access into the program. And once you get that password, you are off and running. And it's basically you're typing in all of the information that we would ask you in the same order over the telephone. So if you've been on the phone with DigSafe before, it's pretty much the same process, except you're doing it yourself instead.
So it's pretty quick and simple. For the seasoned pro, if you're not using it, it's probably something that you should look into, because it can probably save you some time and trouble.
Absolutely. And what I love about it is it gives you a printed confirmation sheet. Now, when you're on the phone with DigSafe, you may notice we have a lot of information to give you at the end of the phone call. We want you to write down the list of the utilities that we're contacting to mark out for you. That way you can track their response. We're also asking you to write down your DigSafe permit number. Anytime you phone phone us for a location, what we do is assign it 11-digit DigSafe number for your reference. That way, it's record that you notified us. It's also going to help us if you have a problem with the job that you've already called in. That ticket number helps us locate it. So with Quick Ticket, you click print, you get your DigSafe number, you got a list of the utilities that we've contacted, and your legal start date and time. I know you're going to ask me about the process, but in our 5 New England states, 4 of them is a 72-hour notice you have to give. That's business hours. Vermont's a 48-hour notice. But right there on the work ticket, you can see it. You know when you're legal to start digging. Now, the law doesn't require that you have this DigSafe permit on site. We would think that's a great idea as a best practice. But if you go online, you can print a few copies of that ticket, leave one in the office, put one out in the field. So that way, if any of you encounter a problem, you've got all the information right in front of you. We're not asking you to write all that information down. When you're on the phone, people lie to us. We can tell they're not writing it down, but they pretend to.
Well, the other thing, too, is if you're getting it electronically with smartphones and so forth, the information is fairly easy to store on a phone and transfer to other people.
Exactly.
So the information can be readily available.
It's very easy to manage.
Even if you're not on site and somebody needs the information, it's readily available to transmit. So
absolutely.
It's a great way to go about it in that respect.
Promise me you'll give it a try.
I will.
All right.
I mean, we're generally defaulting to our excavation contractors as a general contractor, and I think many others are. But there have been times when we've had to call, and we get the ticket number, and we do write it down because it goes in the job folder and it stays with that record.
Good.
We have found that there's liability consequences that we haven't personally experienced, but we have known other trades folks that have suffered some pretty financial hardship because they didn't want to pick up the phone.
Sure, it can be very expensive.
It comes down to, did you keep your records, and were you sure of the start date, the end date, and so forth. There was a major explosion of a dwelling not too long ago over in Boxford because somebody failed to call DigSafe and was doing something on their own.
That's right.
So, again, I'm going to come back to some of the things that you mentioned in the first part, because the homeowners are saying, this doesn't apply to me, but yes, it does.
Oh,
because
it most
the person
certainly
that
does.
blew up this building happened to be the homeowner.
Yes, it was.
And he suffered some real financial consequences because he had not followed the law, and then he was doing stuff that he wasn't permitted for. So it was
And
a
from
real
what I
nightmare.
understand, Bob, he got out just in the nick of time, too. He could have hurt himself, and I believe his mom was in the house, too, so they were lucky that they're still around.
They were very lucky. And then the other end of it is, you may not have insurance coverage
That's
if you
right.
don't follow
Insurance
the rules.
companies really like it when you follow the rules. That's true.
So protect yourself with that phone call. But you mentioned things like put in a basketball hoop for the kids.
Yeah, people don't
Put it in the
realize.
mailbox.
People don't realize mailboxes, fences, basketball hoops. The scary thing about that is you don't have an open trench. So if you do, penetrate a gas line, you might not know until you pull it out. Or there might not be problems for a few days because you can't use your senses. You can't see it, smell it, hear it, so you might not know that you damaged it. So anytime that, whether public or private property, again, we always caution anybody to go ahead. And you know what's killing us also is tent installation. It's the folks who don't think to call DigSafe first when they're having an outdoor wedding. And, last minute they find the weather forecast, it's going to be raining the following weekend. Why not go ahead and call DigSafe, ask them to flag out the area on the property where the tent would go. That way, if you have to put up that tent, the stakes, sometimes they go down 2-3 feet. They can go right through a gas or electric line, and with disastrous results. So we're asking everybody to plan ahead.
See, now these are things that most homeowners wouldn't think of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the tent and the peg, I was something that got by me.
Right.
But I do know that, there are a lot of guys that go out and they'll take a pick and shovel and they'll just start digging because they want to do a little drainage around the house to pull the water away and extend leaders off their downspouts. There are other people that they're going to put in the mailbox, and all of a sudden, the post office is on them because the next snowstorm that came along was something that they weren't prepared for, and the plow truck took their mailbox away.
Right?
So now they're going to go with a granite post, and they go and get this great big granite post to put this thing in, and they go out with the shovel and the whole post hole digger and a pick and a bar, and they just go at it.
And not give much thought as to what might be underground.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and worst case scenario, they go and rent an auger that is gasoline powered, and they start going into the ground and drilling holes into the ground, and the machine gets caught on something and pulls them right down, not knowing what's underneath. Was it a root?
I'm glad you brought it up. We are actually we have a great relationship with rental companies, the Taylor Rentals, all of the rental equipments throughout New England. Home Depot has a rental store in some locations, and they've been very helpful getting the information about DigSafe out. We have a brochure that speaks to the homeowner. Hey, before you rent this auger to put in your mailbox, this is what you should be thinking about. We have stickers for all the equipment, trying to get the 811 number out there because, like you said, homeowners might not be inclined to even give it a thought. So it's very important. We're appealing to the homeowner in all of our advertising as well. I don't know if you've seen our TV spot with Roger Cook from This Old House. WGBH was kind enough to lend Roger Cook to us as our spokesperson, and it's a great fit because Roger's audience is precisely DigSafe's audience right now. Not just the professional, but the homeowner, the do-it-yourselfers, the weekend warriors that go out and want to beautify their own homes and get themselves into some trouble without calling us first. So we're very grateful for his service as well.
Lisa, it's that commercial time again. I've got to break and go to the sponsors. When we come back, let's explain to the homeowner that is smart enough to pick up the phone what they have to do in order to make this work. We'll be back in a moment.
Thank you.
We're back with Lisa Powers from DigSafe. This is Bob Williams. We're on the Star Remodeling Show here. We're talking about ways to keep you safe when you have to do an outside excavation. And the first thing they do is call what number?
811, 3-digit dialing code.
And that will get you hooked up to DigSafe. Doesn't matter what state you are in. You will be connected to somebody that can help you determine whether it's safe to dig. Because it's not a matter of if you can dig, it's a matter of whether there's anything that you should be avoiding.
That's right.
So we get a couple of different things that we haven't touched on. If somebody wants to put in that mailbox, how does DigSafe know where to look?
It's interesting that, DigSafe doesn't actually. It's people think that DigSafe marks out underground utilities, and I appreciate the opportunity to say that we have nothing to do with it. There's about 45 employees at the DigSafe call center, and all we do is run a call center. People think when they come into our office that there's going to be rows of trucks, a fleet outside the building of people who mark out underground facilities, but it's not us that does the marking. We dispatch the utilities to do the marking. So we're just a clearinghouse. If you see DigSafe, we're rows of cubicles and data entry, but it's important first is to make that phone call. Like you said, enough with the judgment calls is, I don't think this applies to me. Pick up the phone and dial 811 for any type of work, whether it's, you're putting in sauna tubes for a deck, or if you're putting in a fence, or if you're even installing, shrubs or trees. All that kind of stuff qualifies. It could get you in trouble if you don't know where the lines are. So dial 811. This, you want to give it 3 business days notice. I've mentioned earlier in the program, 4 of our 5 New England states have a 72 business hour notice. Vermont is a 48-hour notice. That doesn't include weekends and holidays. A lot of contractors and homeowners get on the hook because Monday, say, is Labor Day or Memorial Day, and it doesn't count towards your 3 days. So weekends and holidays don't count towards it. So look at your calendar. Give it at least 3 business days in advance. Wait for everybody to come and mark it out. We'll give you a list of the utility companies that we called for you. We'd love you to write it down, or if you're using the online program as we spoke, it's already printed out for you, but keep track of their response. And once the utility companies have responded and marked out, they usually use stakes or flags or paint. There's a color coding system. Remind me to talk about that in a moment. Once the utilities are out there and you've waited your full legal start date and time, we're asking that you avoid where the lines are. Sometimes that's not so easy in your business. A lot of construction companies find that they got to get pretty close to where that underground facility is. And in every state in the country, there's a tolerance zone. You want to stay away within 18 inches of an underground facility. You don't want to put mechanized equipment within that zone. Utility locating is not an exact science. The utilities have that 18-inch clearance on either side of the facility, so it would be considered a correct mark out within that zone. So if you're going to be coming pretty close, you have to hand dig within 18 inches of that marked underground facility to find it first before moving ahead with mechanized equipment. For contractors, I do a lot of training throughout New England, and I tell everybody the number 1 cause of utility damage in our 5 states anyway isn't failure to notify DigSafe. It's one more scoop. It's the folks that think that facility is a little bit deeper than it is. It's July, it's 90 degrees outside. Who wants to hand dig to find that thing? Let me put the bucket down a little bit lower, get a little bit closer, and that's where people get into trouble. If the state finds teeth marks in a facility that was marked within that 18-inch zone, it's your responsibility. So we want to make sure everybody's safe. So it's a general rule as a requirement. Anytime you come that close, you want to hand dig to find it carefully.
And so we've got a couple things here. You guys take the information, but we still need, as contractors or the homeowners, to provide a rough idea of where this tent for the weekend is going up, or where we intend to put the drainage trench, or we're putting in the new retaining wall, or we're going to put the fence line, which basically means that we have to indicate where we want to dig.
I'm glad you mentioned it. It's called pre-marking, and I should have said that before you pick up the phone to dial 811. You've got to actually show us using white paint, stakes, or flags where you want to dig. And they call it pre-marking. All 5 states have a pre-marking requirement. Homeowners, we still want you to pre-mark. If you're going to be working throughout an entire property, 4 white stakes on all 4 corners of the property, you're compliant. You've showed the utilities where you want to dig, but pre-marking was really designed to indicate where fixed locations are. I want to put the septic system right here on the property. That way you mark it out using white. When the utility companies show up, they know exactly where you want to work, and they mark that area. It helps to reduce excess graffiti out there. We obviously want the utilities to mark where it's needed, but we don't want to put paint where it's not. We want to reduce excess graffiti on city streets and roads and on people's properties. We just want to put the marks where it's needed, and that's why pre-marking is so important.
And especially for something like a deck, if you're in a confined area or a limited area, there's no need to mark the whole property and have them mark the whole thing out. So let's do economy of effort here.
Thank you for that. Amen.
And there is another device that we use quite frequently to do decks that sometimes gets overlooked, which is the Helix techno metal post approach. Mm-hmm. And that's one that if you're using them, it's not their responsibility to know there's nothing down there. It's your responsibility to know that it's safe for them to go ahead.
That's right.
So there are a bunch of different places where this goes on, whether it be driving a well, or it's putting in a fence post, or it's digging for a room addition, for the basement excavation or the garage. We still go through the same hoops. So it doesn't matter how small, that mailbox or that major addition all takes the same requirements. As Lisa said, you can mark out the entire property, and that may be wise on something like a room addition where you want to make sure there's nothing in the way. But, there's a lot of people that think there's nothing under their yard anyhow, and then they find out foolishly later that there was a major gas line that's been buried there for 30 years before they got the property.
Happens all too often. Yep, people buy older properties. They don't have a sense of what's under there.
And the other thing that happens now with more and more utilities burying electrical lines underground. In our region, we find that we don't have the flooding. It's as prevalent as it is in some other areas, so underground utilities become more and more common. So you will see that. So gas lines, electric lines, telephone lines, data communication lines, anything along that whole neck of the realm of installations that require utility service to a building or going to a major location underground. Because stop and think about it. If you've got a major utility trunk line going down the corridor of the street and they veer off and come just inside your property, just behind the sidewalk.
Which happens quite a bit.
Because they're looking at trying to make the straightest run possible if they have to pull wires or push pipe or whatever. So sometimes you may not even be aware that a new gas line has been added simply because nowadays they can do it ballistically underground and shoot a line.
That's right.
So these are the types of things that DigSafe was designed to help keep you out of trouble with. So, Lisa, they get hold of DigSafe how?
811, or you can also go to DigSafe.com for all the information that we talked about today in case you missed any of it. Everything we spoke of is on DigSafe.com. 811 is the phone number nationwide now. If you're a contractor who does this on a regular basis, quick ticket at DigSafe.com to get your permits. It's an easy, efficient way of doing business with us, and you can do it 24/7.
And we're out of time. Lisa, I want to thank you for coming in. If you're a homeowner, this applies to you even more so than you thought. If you're a contractor, you should know better at this point.
I'd like to thank you, Bob. Thanks, Star Construction and WNBP, for having me today. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to your listeners about DigSafe.
Thanks, Lisa. And that's our show for today.
Appreciate it.